I've got at least 10 helpful tips on how to up-pot your citrus in containers. Hi, I'm Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants and author of Saving the World with the Home Garden. And this lesson was inspired by a Facebook group called Growing Citrus in Containers, the link of which I'm going to put down below. And the link I'm encouraging all of you guys to click on and join. It's free to join, and they're doing a free giveaway of 10 bags of the Ivory Organics all-purpose super blend fertilizers, which is our best fertilizer blend that we've been making available for the last couple of years. And as of 2021, and we're now just releasing it through this Facebook group, and you'll within the upcoming days and weeks start seeing it throughout ivoryorganics.com as well as on Amazon, is the Ivory Organics all-purpose super blend fertilizer, which now contains azomite. And when you take a look at the bag, you'll notice that the last ingredient is the azomite, also described as volcanic ash deposit. And just imagine how well the plants in Hawaii thrive on all of the volcanic high micronutrients, the elements plants need in least abundance, combined with offering your plants all of the macronutrients, which are not just NPK. Ivory Organics offers the NPK in addition to the magnesium, the sulfur, and the calcium, which are also macronutrients, nutrients plants need in abundance. So Ivory Organics all-purpose fertilizers offer all of the 6 macronutrients, formerly known as 6 macros plus fertilizers. And you'll notice in the fine print on the very back, we've still kept that 6 macros, and NPK, MGS-CA are registered trademarks of the Ivory Organic Company. But the labels have been evolving, as it's been clearing more states and entering into also more countries around the world. But just letting you know and just reminding you that the Ivory Organics was formerly known as the 6 macros plus fertilizers, and now it's simply Ivory Organics with the NPK on the front. But it clearly states in multiple places on the front and back that it offers all of the macronutrients, a lot of the micronutrients, and we're proud to now partner up with Azomite, which is the leading distributor of micronutrients, crushed rock minerals in the country. So be on the lookout for that. And Growing Citrus in Containers Facebook will be the first one to be distributing these products, and the first one also giving away 10 free bags, free shipping, intercontinental USA. Another helpful article for container citrus care you can find at ivoryorganics.com under Garden Advice. Right near the top, there's a PDF which reads How to Care for Your New Citrus Tree by my friend Al, who lives in Canton, Illinois. That's a grow zone of 5, which is extremely cold. Also, ice on the floor winter, place where the only chance you have of growing citrus is through container gardening and knowing how to acclimate them with indoor growing. This lesson that we're going to go over right now is on up-potting your citrus, and I'm going to give you again at least 10 helpful tips to help you accomplish that goal. But this is only part 1 of about a 4-part lesson, which is also going to include pest control of your container citrus. We're going to talk about amending the soil, how just changing that top inch, and we're not talking about replacing, but improving that top inch can help replenish and rejuvenate the plants for years to come. We're going to be discussing foliar feeding your plants, something that's extremely important, especially during the winter months, but can also be applied throughout the year. And lastly, the importance of whitewashing your plants. So these are all lessons that are all about a 4-part lesson on citrus container care gardening. Let's get started. These lessons I'm about to teach you can be applied to just about any other trees that you've got growing in containers, with the exceptions of avocado. And when I get there, I'll be sure to highlight why and how to treat that differently. But specifically for your citrus care container plants, my first tip is you got to start off with the right rootstock. And over here, I've got 3 different citrus trees. The first one being, if you want to come in a little closer, is a Eureka semi-dwarf lemon tree. And the Eureka lemon, as well as the Lisbon lemon, are the predominant lemons you'll find at your store when you're shopping for lemons. The other variety of lemons that I've also got a hedge of over here are the Meyer Lemons, which are a sweeter variety of lemons. They're thinner skinned and hence are not typically commercially available because they don't transport well, but it's still an excellent asset in the home garden, and hence I've got 3 of them here on my property. But the semi-dwarf, you'll notice that I've got here as a Eureka lemon. Another one I've got over here is the Valencia orange. And again, let's take a look at the height. And then over here it says standard Valencia orange. If you take a look at the bottom, I also encourage that you match citrus. STD is for standard Valencia orange. It's important also, here's a quick, easy, helpful tip. You want to match the label where it says semi-dwarf with the container, semi-dwarf. And for those of you that have been gardening for a long period of time, such as myself, for some reason, labels sometimes jump between trees, and the label on the plant sometimes won't match the container. And if I were to err, you would usually go with the label that's on the container and not the label that's on the plant, as somehow between the people working at the nursery or customers that are touching the plants, the labels end up moving on the wrong plants, and it's gonna take you sometimes years to find out exactly what that mistake was when you picked it up from the nursery. So be sure to match, again, that label on the plant with the label on the container. Very simple, easy, helpful tip. The third citrus tree that I've got over here is the Australian finger semi-dwarf lime. And you can see again, citrus, semi-dwarf, Australian finger lime. And again, we're matching it with the container. You can see the writing is a little different, but it says citrus, semi-dwarf, Australian finger lime. And these are amazing citrus. So imagine like the value of lime, but they come in these little sacks about the size of a fish egg, and offers a crunch that is absolutely spectacular and delicious. Predominantly, in my opinion, complements avocados excellent. So that's another citrus that we're integrating into our home garden as well. So going back to my initial point, the first thing you got to do is select the rootstock. And so we've got semi-dwarf, and standard. And standard is ideal if you're going to be putting it in your ground. A standard tree on average when it comes to citrus will grow a minimum of 15 feet and grow as much as 25 to 30 plus feet. Of course, you can prune it to stay at the lower of the height spectrum, but a standard tree will be growing several feet per year at a minimum compared to a semi-dwarf, which can still put out feet of growth, but it will be a lot more controlled. So let me just show off how large this semi-dwarf citrus tree can grow in ground. This is about after 5 years. My reach is about 8 feet. The plant's at about 10. I can easily bring those extra feet down, so all of the fruit harvest will be within reach. But a semi-dwarf Eureka lemon tree can get huge. But if it was a standard tree, the branches would want to start about where I'm reaching and then continue up another 10, 15, 20 more feet. So big difference between a semi-dwarf versus a standard citrus tree. And my favorite is to go with the semi-dwarf as the option for your container plants. The alternative to the semi-dwarf, which again can push out at least a foot to several feet of growth, and lemons on average are significantly more vigorous than the alternative varieties of citrus such as oranges or grapefruit. So keep that in mind when growing citrus, that your lemons will predominantly grow a lot faster and stronger, especially the Eureka and Lisbon varieties of lemons, whereas the Meyer, the sweeter lemon, which is also believed to have been a cross with a mandarin orange, has characteristics that are also somewhat as oranges, more dense in regards to growth and less vigor compared to the lemons. The third option when selecting a rootstock for a citrus is a dwarf. And when selecting the dwarf variety, you're looking at getting the most compact and slowest growing of the citrus varieties. Dwarfs on average will only measure heights that are between 2 to 5 feet on average again, whereas a semi-dwarf will be closer to about 5, 6 up to about 10 feet. And then obviously the standards can be anywhere from about 10 to 30 feet. So, and again, through pruning, you can always keep your plant towards that lower spectrum range that the plants can otherwise grow. So we talked about standard, semi-dwarf, and dwarf rootstock. Something I saw, and another reason I picked up this particular citrus, is to also share the lesson of be on the lookout for any growth that's below the graft line. So you've selected your rootstock. Your rootstock controls the height and the vigor of the plant. Dwarf, slow growth, semi-dwarf, medium growth, and then standard maximum growth. If you come in a little closer over here, let's take a look at the graft line, which would be somewhere right here. You can see the lighter, paler bark color, and then the darker, and this is the scion or the selected grafted Eureka lemon tree on top of the rootstock, which is down here. But off of the rootstock, below the grafted union of the Eureka lemon, so the Eureka lemon was grafted on top of this rootstock, which offers that semi-dwarf growth and disease resistance and all the value that rootstock offers. But check out this branch over here that's coming out. Check out these leaves. You'll notice this 3-leaf pattern known as the trifoliate. Tri for 3 leaf. Trifoliate citrus was the rootstock selected, which is significantly different than the Eureka lemon leaves, which are just a single lobe. So if this plant was left to grow on its own, the rootstock would most likely predominate, as it's going to feed itself over the grafted union to the detriment of the value of why you brought this plant onto your property, which is to grow Eureka lemons. So you're going to want to now prune off the rootstock, also known as the sucker growth, so that all the resources and minerals and water go to the benefit of the grafted union and not to the rootstock, which is only offering the height control, disease resistance, root rot resistance. Whatever the value is that the rootstock is offering is only supposed to be offering the root benefit, but not the growth. So we're going to be pruning that off together right now. And there it goes. So check out all of that growth, nutrients, nutrition, and everything that went towards sucker growth and taking away from the desired growth of the Eureka lemon. So we've now just corrected that. So be mindful of the size of the citrus tree that you're ultimately looking to grow, and depending on your grow zone, if you live in a place with freezing cold winters where you're gonna have to pull your citrus tree in, you might wanna stick to a dwarf, smaller container, smaller growing size plant, so that you can move it more easily compared to a semi-dwarf that's going to want to achieve a larger size of, like I said, somewhere between 5 and 10 feet, and just be prepared for that future. And lemons on average grow a lot faster than its relative orange and grapefruit varieties. So I picked this Valencia orange because of all of the blooms on here, and it smells spectacular. But here we are in November and it's blooming. I figured whatever garden this is going to end up going to in the upcoming few weeks, they'll have a chance to plant it. But the true blooming phase for most citrus is going to be early spring or after your last chance of frost has passed. So I'm not so concerned about these blooms. But my point when it comes to the blooms is when you repot and uppot your plants, there's a stress to the plant that will cause flower drop, possibly some leaf drop, and if you have any fruit, it's advised that you remove them. So keep that in mind when moving and uppotting your citrus. Another helpful tip when it comes to uppotting your plants is to consider that you should be repeating. Another helpful lesson when it comes to uppotting your plants is to remember that you need to be doing this practice on average every 3 to 5 years. The soonest you should consider when uppotting your citrus plants. So 3 is the soonest, 5 should be the longest that you wait before you consider re-uppotting your plants. And there's a lot of benefits and a lot of reasons, which I'm going to go into in future lessons. The best time for uppotting a citrus, again, is going to be after the last chance of frost has passed your growing zone. The chance of frost for our particular grow zone here in Los Angeles is somewhere between the first weeks of January through the last couple of weeks of January. And to be safe, some charts recommend waiting until about February 15. So somewhere between February 1st to February 15, as the weather begins to warm, the chance of frost is now in the past. And now you're going to start noticing a lot of plants, and especially your deciduous trees, the buds are going to begin to swell and bloom and begin to grow. And that's when life starts for a lot of plants, even your evergreens such as citrus. You got to be watching that chart when that last chance of frost passes, because that's the window when things are going to start to change and that plant is going to begin to experience the beginning of its long grow season for your particular grow zone. That is the window of opportunity. That week or a couple of weeks right after that last chance of frost is your best window for uppotting your plants before they begin to bloom, so that at least the roots are starting to acclimate into the new soil, the new grow zone conditions, and can now bloom without the stress of being uppotted with all the blossoms on the plant. That's ideally. So the next thing we have to do is select a container. We've got large ones, medium-sized ones, smaller ones, and there's so many different options when you go to your local nursery. The first thing is this here, which looks like it's made out of clay or ceramic, is in fact a fiberglass, very light container. It probably weighs about 2 pounds. And the first thing that caught my attention is it's got no drain holes, and that's actually a very important consideration when selecting a container for your citrus. This one over here also has no drain holes, but they've made it easy over here where they've got these little puncture locations if you come in a little closer, and you would simply take your Phillips screwdriver, and let's set this down here so I can show you. And it shows you, just gonna put your screwdriver right there and then just do your karate hand right over the screwdriver and it should pop right out. Let's see. And there it goes. 1 and 2. So now we've just added some drain holes to the container. And 2 is good, but it might not be enough. And I actually would recommend adding a couple more. Other alternatives over here is the third one. And again, you can see again, they got that screwdriver with that karate hand where again, you can puncture 2 holes for drain holes. But this container here is unique. They're actually recommending they actually water through the bottom container, which is over here. This is like the saucer, and that the water is going to go here and be wicked through these drain holes at the bottom, and then you're going to water the plant from the bottom up. And a lot of pros that I've got to meet with and consult with over the last several years will say that's not the natural way to be watering a plant. So when nature waters the planet, it doesn't do so from below the root ball up. It's actually just the opposite. It's watered at the top level, enriching and bringing the nutrients that you've enriched at the top of the soil down and into the root ball. And it's not the opposite effect. And there's another benefit to all the microorganisms in your organic soil that also benefit from also being watered from the top down. So another consideration is, for example, if you've got drip irrigation on one side of the container, you're going to want to more uniformly water, possibly consider adding a second or even a third drip irrigation so that it's more uniformly watered across the topsoil, so that all of the roots and all the air roots are benefited from that water that happens from the top down, again, just as nature intended. So instead, I'm not going to be going with this container, but I'm narrowing it down to one of these 3 containers. We're planting the Eureka lemon, and the Eureka lemons are vigorous growers and will easily have a root system that'll contain this volume of soil and will accomplish the height to support a large container size such as this one, even for the semi-dwarf size. Had I gone with a dwarf Eureka, I would probably go with the smaller container size, as it would do fine in this container for at least 3 and maybe even upwards of 5 years. The finger lime over here would be the better choice, or even any orange or grapefruit variety that is a semi-dwarf or smaller could do better in a smaller container. And bear in mind, this is going to be its home for at least 3 years. So what we're going to do now is we're going to improve drainage by adding, if you've got on your property an old ceramic clay pot, I've got a lot of pieces from prior containers that I've saved, knowing that I'm going to be preparing for another container planting, And then just take a look here as we drop these shredded containers near the bottom. And we're just gonna block those holes with that. I'm next gonna take, I've got some gravel over here. I'm gonna do a layer of that. And the next important consideration is now selecting the right potting soil. And this is where I see a lot of people make mistakes. They'll use products such as Amend, they'll use products such as even using up their own native soil in their property, when a good potting soil is designed to improve drainage and also help retain moisture. They seem counterintuitive, but a good potting soil has products such as perlite, vermiculite, sphagnum peat moss, among others, that again help with retaining moisture for a longer period of time than your native soil would otherwise be able to do, as well as also better than a compost, which also doesn't retain moisture as well as what a potting mix blend can actually do for your soil. Grafting Dragon Fruit's preferred soil potting mix is called Ocean Forest, made by Fox Farms, and typically can be found at a hydroponic store nearest to you. So I'm out of the Fox Farm Ocean Forest potting soil mix, so instead of that I'm going to be using this product over here, which is for raised beds and also a potting mix. What I brought over here is an Amend, and this product is ideal for your in-ground plantings. And again, this is equivalent to like your compost that you might be making at home, which I recommend over buying products. But over here is a potting mix, which again has, if we open it, you'll see all of that perlite, which is the white specks that are within the soil. And we're going to be adding a layer of potting mix now to the soil. Do not use an Amend and do not use other compost products direct, as those products will be breaking down significantly faster. Imagine compost goes from food and leaves into pretty much virtually dust, disappears. If you're putting compost in your potting mixes, and especially near the bottom of the container, all of that is going to disintegrate and the plant's going to settle and sink in that container. And that's one of the reasons about every 3 to 5 years that you're going to have to repot your plants to adjust the height and to rejuvenate any root-bound roots as well. So we've got a layer of potting mix here in the container. What I want to share with you, and something I also do with a lot of my potted plants, is I add some additional perlite to the base, which again further helps with drainage, further helps prevent the risk of root rot. And here that is. And keep in mind that even though this helps increase drainage, it also retains moisture. If you follow here for perlite, it says helps to prevent soil compaction, promotes strong root development, and used with potting mixes or garden soil. And I'm just going to add a few handfuls of more perlite to the product. And I'm going to mix that into the potting soil like so. And that's just going to give it an extra level of just better aeration for the roots and help further prevent that risk of root rot. And now let's continue filling this up about halfway. So before we add any more potting mix to the container, we should check to see how it's going to fit within. If we take a look at the plant, you're going to want to make sure that the topsoil in the container is going to match the topsoil level that's going to be in your graduated container. But another helpful tip that a lot of people overlook is that the growers will sometimes add, just as they're selling the plant, an extra inch or 2 or even 3 inches of additional soil that's going up the trunk of the tree, leading to another phenomenon, not root rot, but now stem rot. the stem is now in contact with too much wet soil, and the bark that is supposed to be above the ground is now beginning to rot and contributes to declining health and potentially the death of your plant. So it's important to also check to see where the roots are of that plant and to see if in fact they've added inches of additional compost to the soil. So I'm just gonna check to see where are those air roots of the plant. And so far I've taken off a solid inch. So I was correct in my theory that this one also had additional soil dumped on it before they sold it. And the growers believe that a container with more soil is gonna appear to be a plant of more value than a container that's only got half as much soil in it, again, due to settling that naturally occurs depending on the quality of the soil, that potting soil used. So again, we're now coming in contact with those air roots, but I still don't see a good flare up coming off the roots until right now and right here. That's the initial root. And that is where we're gonna wanna now cover the soil level up no more than about 1/4 of an inch. So we're now know that the soil level is here, and now we can actually raise the potting soil in the container about an extra inch to accomplish that level. We're going to just tap on the bottom of the container. Sometimes you can get your finger in there and you're gonna want to try to pull it loose, and here it comes. Again, this is another opportunity to check the height. At this point, it's too high in the container, as we're gonna want to leave at least 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of a rim to allow for fertilization, for mulching, for watering. So I'm gonna actually reduce the level. And so now we're at a level where we'll have room for watering, fertilization, mulching. That there is the primary root that's flaring out from the tree trunk and the beginning of the root zone. And now we're gonna backfill it with additional potting soil. So now we're gonna wanna remove the soil away from the tree trunk. Again, covering that root system by no more than 1/4 of an inch. Make sure that any of the air pockets around the plant, you're adding gentle pressure around it so that the roots are not in pockets of air where they're gonna potentially dry out. And so we're adding some pressure around it like so, leveling the soil, and just making sure that all of these air roots that are near the top over here, as you can see, coming a little close, and just making sure that all of these air roots that you see near the top over here are covered between the soil and the mulch that we're gonna add in a future lesson. So the next thing we're gonna do now is feed the plant using the Ivory Organics all-purpose fertilizer that offers your plants all of the macronutrients, a lot of the micronutrients, and now the super blend includes azomite, which is that volcanic crushed rock ingredient that you'll find on the back. And what I want to share with you when it comes to fertilizing is I've got this fertilizer chart. And I want to share with you that in winter, you're supposed to barely be feeding your plants compared to in spring a little bit more. Summer the most, when you're peaking light hours, peaking warmth, peaking fruit, flowers, growth. Everything's happening in the summer and then tailoring off in the fall and winter going back down. The greatest value to plants in the winter, especially your evergreens such as your citrus, is doing foliar feeding. And we're going to discuss that in an upcoming lesson. So the next thing we're going to do is just lightly feed the plants. And there's clear directions over here on the back when it talks about potted plants. It says over here, apply 1 tablespoon of the all-purpose fertilizer per gallon size container and up to 5 tablespoons every 30 days. Keywords: during the growing season. And here we are in November, and it's not the growing season, but I'm still going to offer the fertilizer to make sure it's got all of the nutrition. And I'm not adding, I'm guessing over here I've got at least a 5-gallon container, but I'm only going to be adding a 1/2 of a tablespoon over here of the product. So I'm going in here with about, let's say about maybe a teaspoon to a tablespoon. This thing full would be a tablespoon, so I'm just under a tablespoon mark. And keep in mind the size of this container is at least 5 But I'm just sprinkling this near the surface, and as soon as we water it, the product's gonna start working its way down. You'll want to make sure when you water, you are mimicking rain. And that was the tip and the point we discussed earlier, is you don't want to water from the bottom up. A drip irrigation is only going to be watering one side of the tree. You want to make sure that when you water, you're soaking the container and you're making sure all parts of the container are being equally watered. To make sure that a lot of the nutrients are not being washed away with this watering, I've got a saucer over here as well. And what we're going to do is put the container in the saucer. So the goal when watering, now that we put the saucer in place, is to capture that additional water that's leaching through, as that water is now high in nutrients. It's a nutrient-dense solution. We're going to want to make sure that the container absorbs and soaks as much of that mineral solution as possible for the first day. But starting on day 2, if that water is not gone, we're going to want to take this container, put it aside, drain the extra solution off so that we don't end up with a container that's too moist for too long. The goal now between waterings is to wait until the soil dries between waterings, but never bone dry. So you might have to scratch down about an inch or 2 or 3 until you get familiar with what the dryness should look like, so that the plant doesn't get overwatered, nor is it ever underwatered. So if you want to get your hands on a free bag of the Super Blend Plus Azomite Blend, which is now for free at Growing Citrus in Containers Facebook group, and you'll find hundreds of people that are ready, willing, and happy to answer your citrus container growing questions. Stay tuned for the subsequent parts on container citrus care, which include foliar feeding, whitewashing, pest control, and amending that top inch of soil, which you can do for both your container and in-ground citrus. To stay connected with all of these citrus care lessons that are going to be published in the upcoming 30 days, be sure to subscribe and hit the push bell notification. If you found this lesson helpful and informative, please be sure to also give us that thumbs up and share it with your gardening friends and family. As always, keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all happy gardening.